This episode is supported by MonsterJoysticks.com. Level up your Raspberry Pi with our all-in-one arcade kit using genuine Sanwa arcade parts. And OneClickPrint.com for your photos on canvas, acrylic, gifts and more. Local craftsmen and global delivery. What was PC gaming like just before the explosive power of 3D acceleration from the famous 3DFX Voodoo cards dropped on us in 1996? Hello cave dwellers. Today we're turning this compact Presario here into a retro gaming rig, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to consider where PC gaming was at when this thing was released around 1995-1996. It's a very specific point in time in PC gaming history. When console gamers had taken to the Sony PlayStation in their masses, the hyped Nintendo 64 was about to launch, and nearly every game on every platform was expected to use polygons, to be in true 3D. In early 96, the pressure to give us PC gamers accelerating 3D graphics hardware, which could be used universally across all games to set a standard, was well and truly building, and that dam would burst with those 3DFX cards. But they weren't out yet. This is a self-imposed dilemma. And so, deciding on what video card to buy at this time is a key component to a good gaming PC. It's quite the minefield. I mean, it's hard enough in the present day to pick a video card, isn't it? But at least you know whichever card you buy, it will be supported by all games thanks to Microsoft's DirectX, acting as a standard software layer. An application programming interface that removes the confusion of hardware compatibility for gamers and developers alike. But in 96, such luxury wasn't the case, as is illustrated by this article from the same year.
The first generation of 3D accelerator cards have arrived. Many consumers are holding off though, waiting to see which chipset looks to gain the widest support from game developers, which is what it boils down to. With the market about to be flooded by dozens of 3D boosters of various configurations, it's going to be a tough call for buyers, especially considering the premium price of these wafers of silicon joy.
Wafers of silicon joy. Sounds delicious. That's the climate of PC hardware at the time of this PC's release. I suggest what we do is take a look at it, see what its standard base configuration is, and then we'll try to make some period accurate upgrades and learn a little bit more about the year and what was available as we go along. So this beastly tower cost me £50 on eBay, which I thought was a reasonable price, but then I do eat, sleep and live retro, so perhaps I'm not the best person to ask. It's a sizable case. It's not a full tower case, but it has got space for 3 5¼ inch drives. It's got the original 3.5 inch hard drive in there, still working, and space for more. I think it's a good looking machine, but I understand that many of you might think it's fairly unremarkable looking from the outside. The build quality of it really does put it in a price bracket above what you might have spent on an off-the-shelf gaming PC. If that's what you wanted, you may have gone with a Packard Bell, like I did back in the day, or a Gateway PC at a lower price point. Or you may have bought yourself a cheap case, as I did with my second PC, and built your PC from components. But that wouldn't have stopped me from admiring this case from afar back in the day, I'm sure. Now, this was more likely to have been found in an office than as a gaming PC, but we won't let that stop us today. It's hard to find a reference to this machine in the magazines of the day, perhaps due to its utilitarian nature, shall we say. But it does crop up in this Italian magazine, PC Open, in 96, where it's pitched against an IBM Aptiva 2168. And there it's listed as 4,990 Italian lira, which translates to around £2,500, 3,200 US dollars. And they did praise the overall quality of the machine. They were pretty happy with it. Looking around the back here, there's no less than 5 slots, the system board over here, and it looks like a modem over here. The previous owner seems to have put a sound card in here, despite it having onboard sound, so perhaps they were having compatibility issues. It does seem to have onboard video with a VGA port here, serial port, PS2 ports for your keyboard and mouse, and a parallel port, and a game port, so it's got an onboard joystick port, 15-pin joystick port there. So nothing surprising there. Let's get the sides off and see what we've got inside. Now I've chosen first of all to take this side off, which is closest to the system board. Ordinarily you take the opposite side off to get to the system board, and you'll see why when we take this off, because it's a little bit unusual compared to a standard PC you might expect today. Yeah, instead of finding the back of the system board, we find we've got full access to the system board from that side. Now on paper, as standard, we would expect to find a Pentium, first generation Pentium CPU running at 120 megahertz, 8 megabytes of RAM, although we've clearly got mismatched sticks in here, so I'm hoping this has been upgraded. A 1.2 gigabyte hard drive, which is not accessible from this side. We'll get to that shortly. And there's your dial-up modem down here. Not that we're going to put that to the test today. But it is unusual that you only see one ISA slot. Of course, this tower PC doesn't have a single ISA slot. Let me take you around to the other side of the case and take that side off. So we have a dividing partition here into which the system board is mounted on the other side, and then we've got 4 16-bit ISA slots and 2 PCI slots in this proprietary daughter board, which breaks out all of those extra slots. And you've got the IDE and the floppy connectors, which wind their way up here, and you've got your drive bay up here. That, as a bonus in the PCI slot, is a Sound Blaster card, a CT4810, but I suspect we will take that out today. So it's a slightly unusual setup, but as a computer tech, this combined with the nice big thumb screws on the back would actually make this nice and quick to get the side off, and it would have made it an enjoyable machine, I think, to work on during repair or upgrade duties. Ignoring that Sound Blaster card, we'll just look at what's on board here. And over here we've got, for video duties, an S3 Trio 64V video chip, which comes with 1 meg standard, but up here there is a 2 meg video upgrade option that you could just slot on to increase that. And then down here is an Ensoniq, just behind those cables, ESS audio drive chip. So that isn't actually a bad combination. It would give us adequate 2D performance, but it doesn't have any 3D hardware acceleration built in. Unlike S3's other chip, the Verge, which came out in 1995, the S3 Verge was one of the first to push for a 3D standard. In that instance, it was what they named the S3D graphics engine, but it didn't take off. Just looking on the inside of the case here, there's a sticker which explains what's on the system board. And I noticed there's a VGA feature connector, which is nice. That's if you've got an ISA MPEG board, you would then use the ribbon cable to connect it up so that the decoded video would be overlaid with your regular VGA output or SVGA output. And there's an MPEG option connector. So the S3 chip had an optional MPEG decoder module that you could put on there, in addition to the optional memory that you could put on there. So quite flexible and very much geared towards multimedia. Now, I'd like to put this to the test. We'll be benchmarking this before and after any upgrades that we put in there, so we can do a side-by-side comparison. We'll take out that Sound Blaster card, but I am going to leave the additional memory that's in there. And in taking this card out, I've come to realise it's perhaps not as convenient as first thought, because if your screwdriver's too long, it's not going to get in there to be able to undo the screw. So you need a short screwdriver, chaps. And we'll give it a quick dust out as well. There we go. Now to complete the look, I got back onto eBay and bought some more accessories, namely this. A Compaq branded V55 CRT monitor, a Compaq keyboard, and a Compaq mouse. All of which needs a very quick clean. This is not a refurb or cleaning episode, so bear with me. I'll give everything a quick wipe down and then we'll put this to the test. And here is our machine ready to go. Now this is proving to be one of the trickier ones to get the camera in sync with. So there may be some flickering, but I'll switch to an actual screen capture for the comparison process. So let's power it on. Hopefully we'll hear that lovely hard drive, that original 1 gig or thereabouts hard drive spinning into life. And we've got Windows 95 on the drive already. I haven't set Windows 95 up. This is just how it arrived from eBay. And there we are. In Windows, there's very little on here, to be honest. There's nothing too much to get excited about. It's a pretty clean install. I have found in Device Manager that because that other sound card was in there, which we've removed, our ESS sound card and the joystick game port has a red cross against it. If we check the properties, it's just saying that it's disabled. But there is a driver installed, so if we just enable that, and the same with the joystick port. There we go. They say they're good. We'll give it a reboot and we should have audio. And we do indeed now have the audio working. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to capture how this thing works, some games, some benchmarks, things like that. Then we'll get to our upgrades next, and then we'll do side-by-side comparisons with the captures to see how this thing performs. In its base configuration, it really isn't a bad little gaming machine, and you will see how it performs when I've got something to compare it to on the screen side by side shortly. So it's time to put your gamer pants on, Mr. Presario, because despite looking like it's made to create spreadsheets, and me looking like your dad's accountant, I am determined to have some fun with this and to upgrade it and to make it an even better gaming machine. My dream 1996 gaming machine in the context of that year without the choice of the 3DFX card. So the mind immediately goes to video and sound for upgrades when it comes to gaming machines, because I think we've got a pretty solid processor in there in that Pentium 120. So let me show you what I've got on the table here as my chosen upgrades. So the first thing I've chosen for the video card is this, the Matrox Millennium. I used to call it Matrix, but apparently Matrox is the proper way to say it. It's got 2 meg of RAM on board. It's got the Matrox MGA 2064W chip on there. And it can be upgraded to 4 meg. I think it may be you could even take it up to 8 meg. But it's done through this connector here. And I've actually got another card here, another Matrox Millennium with that 2 meg upgrade on there. So this is a 4 meg card. And we will be using this card. Incidentally, this is a compact OEM one. So it suits the case perfectly. It didn't come with the case originally. I just picked this one up on eBay. And instead of RAM, you could also put an MPEG decoder daughter board on there. So it's quite a flexible card. The Millennium would have cost you $329 US or around £250 at the time, which would have been considered a premium price for a video card. But Matrox could do that. Matrox has been creating video cards since 1978 and had a reputation for high quality cards with a crisp and vibrant image. And their new card, the Millennium, promised that high-end 2D performance, so on paper, it seemed like a safe bet. And the Millennium promised so much more. Support for Microsoft's fledgling Direct Draw and Direct Video would give us, apparently, smooth 30 frame per second video playback, but we will put that to the test in our benchmarking. But crucially, and this is the key selling point, it offered hardware-accelerated 3D graphics. Not via Microsoft's Direct 3D, which didn't appear until June 96 in its first very limited iteration, but with its own proprietary API, which games would need to support if the card's full potential was to be unlocked. It wasn't Matrox's first attempt at 3D acceleration. They had previously released the Impression Plus, which was aimed at 3D acceleration for computer-aided design. The Millennium card incorporated some of those 3D capabilities, but like the Impression Plus, a major omission was that it has no hardware texture mapping support. But this was Matrox, a trustworthy name in the business. This is surely the future of PC gaming. Trust me, everything is going to support this card. Similar cards which we may have considered as an alternative were the Creative 3D Blaster, which was based on the Verity V1000 chip, the Nvidia NV1, the ATI 3D Rage, and the S3 Verge, which we mentioned earlier, all of which had their own proprietary 3D APIs, just like the Millennium, and expected game developers to cater to them. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Everyone was trying to get in on this. Even game developer Sierra put out a 3D card called the Screaming 3D card, which also had the Verity V1000 chip on it. The sensible thing to do, of course, would be to just sit and wait it out and to let the market figure itself out to see which card to go for. That's what I did. I had a Cirrus Logic Daytona, I think it was, video chip. I think it was an onboard video chip, and I just sat and waited until we saw who the victor was. I even went down the video shop and used to hire a PlayStation and Gran Turismo at the weekends to get my 3D gaming fix, but I got my upgrade in the end. So we've got our video installed. Let's turn our attention to audio next, and this was a much simpler choice. I've got a card right here on the table to show you. In the mid-90s, Sound Blaster reigned supreme. If you didn't have a genuine Sound Blaster card from Creative Labs, then you got one that was Sound Blaster compatible. It's just the way it was. And the ESS and Sonic sound chip in the compact that we've got today is Sound Blaster compatible. But what I always wanted was this, the OR64. This arrived in the second half of '96. It has 512k of RAM on board, and you could get a 4 meg version if you got the OR64 Gold Edition, and that also had some other extras, including gold connectors. And this was probably an earlier model because it's got the black ports on the back. So the later ones had the AC97 color-coded ports, and there was also a PCI version that came later, but this is an ISA version, which I hope will help with compatibility in DOS gaming for me. The big feature on this card is wavetable synthesis sound fonts. That's not too easy to say, I can tell you. Realistic sounding instruments, which will hopefully help our MIDI music to sound much nicer than the Ensoniq that we've got on board. So let's get this installed and we'll go for round 2 of benchmarking and testing. So what can our machine do, and are my upgrade choices the right ones? We'll start by checking that CPU in SysID here, and it is indeed an Intel Pentium running at 120 MHz. There's no fancy MMX support. This is a first generation Pentium. And checking the RAM, we have 56 meg installed, which is plenty, more than I think I'm going to need in this system. Everything is looking good in Device Manager. You can see our S3 Trio 64V Plus video adapter, and I have to say it's much better than what I was expecting to find in here. It's definitely reflective of the premium price this compact tower commanded. But it does only have 1 meg of video memory, and that means as we slide the resolution up, the color depth goes down, because there isn't the memory to define all of that per pixel information. So the balance here is a resolution of 800 by 600 with 16-bit color depth. And you wouldn't really want to take it any higher anyway, at least the resolution any higher on my 15-inch CRT monitor. It just gets uncomfortable if you do. Contrast that with our upgraded system. The Matrox Millennium gives us its own display property tabs, and we can see that the extra memory affords us 32-bit color at any resolution I throw at it. And if we drop into the advanced settings, we can see that 4 meg of memory is detected. Both cards give a bright, clear and steady image though, and the addition of extra memory to the video RAM expansion port on the motherboard would bring that S3 on a par for display options here, I think. Let's see though how it handles our MPEG video file. I've pulled the intro video from the game Return to Zork, and it's the real magic version of the game that relied on you owning an MPEG decoder card to be able to run it and decode these videos. Playback in a window first then, and to my eye, the Matrox card is a little ahead of the S3. It seems smoother to me when in motion, and the image is just a little clearer, but it's really hard to see the difference in image quality. If I freeze the video here, what we've got on the screen is the S3 image. And now I'm going to slowly bring the Matrox image in from the right to the left, and then I'll freeze it halfway. So the right side is the Matrox, the left side is the S3. And you've got to look really, really closely to see a difference here, especially when the video's in motion. But for me, in this still image, the contrast is just a little bit better on the Matrox. You can see around the tree trunks in the background and around the grass textures. It's just a little deeper and a little bit more well defined. But I've stared at this thing for about 20 minutes to try and see those differences, so is it a £250 difference? No. So far it's absolutely not. But there is a tiny difference there. The real difference though comes when we go full screen. All of the colour depth goes out of the window here on the S3, and a heavy use of dithering kicks in all over the screen. Switch to the Matrox now and it maintains the full colour depth and that slightly smoother playback. And if there's one thing you wanted in the mid-90s, the era of FMV cutscenes, it was that high-quality full-screen playback. So the Matrox wins the 2D tests for me. And we will come on to 3D shortly, but what about the sound card upgrade first? Was that worth it? Well, let's try out some MIDI files and we'll alternate between the two devices to hear the difference. I think that's really clear cut. The sound fonts loaded into the All64's memory elevates MIDI music hugely. Let's listen to something more familiar now. This is Duke Nukem 3D's theme song, Grab Bag, playing in the FM mode on the ESS chip. Here it is in all mode on the All64. It's kind of odd because I'm so used to that first version that I can appreciate the instruments sound better on the All64. But the tune sounds not quite right for my taste in this instance. It's just not how I remember it. On now to 3D gaming, which is where the Matrox Millennium promises me an elevated hardware accelerated experience over the S3. The key to enjoying this though is games that are aware of the 3D hardware or patches to make them aware of it to take advantage of the Millennium card. So if we run a Quake Benchmark, for example, on our stock system, that comes out with a result of 18.2 frames per second. On our upgraded system, it runs almost identically. I'm getting 18.4 frames per second, and that's to be expected because this is all running under software rendering. A game that is supported is Papyrus's Nascar racing, truly the crisis of his day. This thing was known to slay the most powerful computers in SVGA mode. The box recommends a Pentium 60 CPU and we've got double that speed. So in VGA mode here, it zips along on our stock system. Yes, it looks like a pixel soup at times in this low resolution, but it's entirely playable and I would have been pretty pleased with this at the time. But switch now to the high resolution mode with software rendering and everything changes. Even with the game automatically turning off textures on the road and the grass, it's visibly choppy. In comparison, we'll run the Matrox accelerated version, specifically the high resolution mode, which is catered to our Millennium card.
This is Nascar racing.
Yeah, I've got to be honest, I'm not seeing a great difference here. Is this thing even on? Let's check it side by side. It's difficult to see a noticeable hardware acceleration effect. It certainly made no difference to the image quality. There's no hardware anti-aliasing or anything like that. It's not given the game a sufficient bump to turn the road or grass textures on while maintaining a good frame rate. And if you look closely at times, it's even switching more things off on the hardware accelerated version to keep the frame rate up at times when compared to the software render. So let's max out the graphics settings in the game and see how it compares then. Now with everything turned on to the max, we are getting a noticeably better frame rate from the Matrox. I can definitely see it with my own eyes, but I mean, this was £250. It promised me hardware acceleration. And if I've got to strain to see the difference side by side with software rendering, then come on Matrox. I'm feeling a bit cheated out of my money here. But NASCAR 2 is just one game. Let's see how that hardware acceleration performs on some other games. Well, I'd love to. But NASCAR Racing was the only game ever released with support for the Matrox Millennium's 3D acceleration. That's it. Not Tomb Raider, not Quake, nothing else. £250 in 1996 for a card that offered me not a lot more than I already had in the tower. Admittedly, the chip that I found in there, the S3 chip, was a lot better than I was expecting, so that narrowed the gap in 2D performance. But come on, where's my £250 worth of 3D acceleration? Clearly, I've backed the wrong horse, and plenty of others did too. There was the Creative 3D Blaster, which received support for about 13 games, the Nvidia MV1 with 7 games, the S3 Verge got 18 games, Matrox's next attempt, the Mystique, that same year in 96, got 12 games, and the most popular, the one that nearly made it, was the Rendition Verity, which had 26 games with hardware support for it. So many different graphics cards were promising to be the future of 3D, and well, it's hardly surprising, is it, that I ended up going down a dead end. It was a tough time to be a PC gamer. The answer, of course, came with that raw power of the 3DFX cards. They arrived in October of 1996, and yes, it would have been painful, but I would have put my hand in my pocket to get one. And that Matrox card doesn't go completely to waste, because this is a Diamond Monster 3DFX card. It's 3D only, and it still needs a 2D card to work alongside it. So the result is, for this build, my pretend 1996 build, is that I get to enjoy the benefits of a premium 2D performance Matrox card. We'll forget ever whispered promises of 3D acceleration into our collective ear, and I can enjoy the raw 3D power of that 3DFX card. Now that is a 1996 gaming PC. 96 has been an expensive year for me, but as I head into 97, I've got a very powerful games machine, and I'll have a lot of enjoyment with it. At least until the 3DFX Voodoo 2 cards come out, I don't need to think about spending any more money. Which is in about 12 months' time in 1998. I better start saving. As always, thank you for watching. Do share your thoughts. Did you pick this card? Did you pick one of those other dead-end cards before getting a 3DFX card like I did? Let me know in the comments section. Take care. Bye-bye. If you've enjoyed today's video and what I do here in general, then consider heading over to patreon.com/retromancave, where a small contribution will give you access to all videos 1 week early without any adverts, but most importantly, you'll become an official cave dweller. I hope to see you there, and thank you.